Welcome to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm Grace Holland. 70 people are out of their homes after a massive fire at a Morrisville apartment building Monday night that injured 6 people. Tuesday, fire inspectors came to the Camden Westwood Apartments to figure out how it happened as aid workers helped those affected figure out how to move forward. WRAL's Heidi Kirk joins me now. She's been covering this story since we first started to hear about it. Heidi, thanks for being here.
Thanks, Grace.
So what is the timeline so far, according to investigators and witnesses that you've spoken to?
Yeah, so most of the information we've received is from a press conference on Tuesday. So everything that you hear right now is fairly fresh information. Of course, this is going to be unfolding in the days to come, but we do have a pretty good idea of where things stand now. So the Morrisville Fire Department got a call at around 6:15 on Monday evening. So, right during that rush hour, lots of people heading home. This was a very high visibility situation. Lots of people on their way home from work and seeing that big dark plume of smoke really going up into the air. Of course, we had Sky 5 up above that fire, so many of you know what this looks like. And immediately, multiple units from both the Morrisville, Cary, and Apex Fire Department headed to that scene. And they contained the fire within about an hour. As of Tuesday, there is no cause determined, so we don't know exactly what led up to this, but it was obviously a very dramatic scene in the lead up to this. Lots of smoke just floating over the town of Morrisville, something that people were capturing on their phones, taking videos, and so this really became a really high profile event all in all.
When you got out there Monday night, I know I was in the newsroom working on WRAL News Plus, and when Sky 5 initially got to the scene, the first thing we saw is that orange glow through the trees. I mean, the fire was still very active. So when you got there, what were you seeing?
Well, Grace, it was a really jarring scene to walk up on. I ultimately parked across the street because it was just so congested in the area. The entirety of the apartment complex was blocked off by caution tape. It was really locked down from an outside perspective, but of course they were allowing media to go around the caution tape to really get an up-close look at what was going on here. And the first thing I really started to notice when I got there was that the fire seemed to be under control. You could definitely tell that there were some hot spots, which we always see for several hours really after the initial fire starts burning. You also really hear lots of people around. There's sirens, there's people walking all over the place, really, coming out from their apartments to check this out. There are those folks who've been displaced walking all over the place. You can, hear all of those sounds of the people, the sirens really combining to just kind of this low hum kind of all over the place. And, we walked all the way around the building, and the first thing that you really notice is that it's clearly a very confined chunk that caught fire here. So, several units, actually 30 units we know because of that press conference, that were affected. Some of them were completely damaged, destroyed. There really isn't a better way to put it. They were just, charred in every which way. Other units were in a little bit better shape. They just more so had that smoke damage. You can see kind of the walls with the burnt, smoke that we tend to see after something like this happens. But overall, just a really jarring experience to walk up on, and you can't imagine what it is like to be one of the people who watched this all play out from start to finish.
And as the sun rose this morning and we saw the images of what was left of the apartment complex, like you said, that top floor really badly damaged, but as you said, maybe those lower floors a little bit less as they continue to assess that. But when you went back out there on Tuesday, how were the people who lived in this apartment building that was affected doing, the people that you talked to?
They are just really shaken up, and this is not just the people who were displaced and really lived through this, but also the people from the surrounding apartment complexes. One of the people who I spoke with was just a gentleman and his young son, maybe about 3-4 years old, who were just walking around and kind of staring up at this apartment building that was damaged. And, I said, "Did you live here?" And he said, "No, I live right across the street though." And I saw this all unfold, and we just had to come down and look at it up close just because it was so jarring from far away. We really wanted to see what it looked like. And they're definitely shaken up. And of course, everyone's hearts are with the people who ultimately were displaced from this. And, we talked to several of them. The range of emotions is really dramatic here. We talked to someone in the early hours of the morning who'd just come out first thing to kind of see for himself, what his unit looked like, as the sun has really peeked out and we could really see the extent of the damage. And, he said, "At this point, I am just grateful that I made it out alive," after you see something like that. And then we talked to other people who, are just absolutely heartbroken and devastated and can barely speak because they are so upset because of this. And, we were working to get interviews with some of these people, and I was told over and over again, understandably so, we can't talk about it because we will just break down in tears. So they're very much still in recovery mode, taking this all in, figuring out their next steps. Not only where are they going to live, but also how are they going to recover emotionally from this? So all in all, it's just a lot across the board for these people.
Right. I mean, it's a type of grief that they're going to have to go through as they try to navigate what comes next. We're going to take a quick break right here, and when we come back, we're going to talk about where this investigation goes from here. Welcome back. We are talking about the fire at an apartment complex in Morrisville, the Camden Westwood Apartments. 70 people now out of their homes because of this. And as the investigation gets going, a question that we had pretty early on is, what is the history here, Heidi, of these apartments, and have there been other incidents of fires there?
Well, Grace, I found it interesting pretty much as soon as we started to post these images from up above, from down below on our Facebook pages, our Instagram pages, our social media accounts across the board. People started to respond and say, "I think I remember a fire there before. I remember you referencing that on Tuesday." We've all thought about these things. And so, we looked into it, and I'm going to reference some reporting from our investigative reporter, Sarah Kruger. She found that this is the third fire that we have covered at the complex. One in 2009. We know that was caused by a cigarette started on the balcony, and then another one 10 years later in 2019, which, this is interesting. The town says the cause was never determined. So I think this raises a lot of questions from there. And we try to get some answers to those. There are definitely still a lot of things hanging out in the open. Sarah actually wrote to Camden Westwood, the complex, their officials, and they didn't write back to us. She actually walked up to them at the press conference on Tuesday asking about the fire history, when the most recent inspection was, all of those questions that we want to know the answer to. And they basically said, "We are not authorized to talk to the media at this time." So a lot of questions still standing out there that we will definitely need to look into more in depth, and hopefully we can eventually share some answers with these folks.
Right. And, as we're doing that, I'm sure the investigators, the fire marshal's office, I think state officials are involved in this effort to investigate the cause of this fire. What do we know about that investigation so far, and where they are with determining a cause with this fire?
Well, I'll tell you, just being out on the scene on Tuesday, you could really see just how many people are involved in this investigation. The Morrisville Fire Chief calls it a coordinated approach. He says that we have both the state fire marshal, the Wake County fire marshal, and the Morrisville fire marshal all on the scene working to really figure out exactly what caused this. And from here, it really goes to the property damage assessment. They're going to continue investigating on the scene, but they're also going to have folks come out and really assess what that damage looks like, and that starts on Wednesday. We do know that it's a total loss. They don't know what the dollar amount is at this point, but they know that it is just damaged irreparably. One thing that they shared at the press conference was that we know that the fire started on the first floor unit outside on the balcony, but that's pretty much all we know at this point. So lots of questions hanging out there that I'm sure we'll get some answers to in the future.
Right. And it'll just be so interesting to hear how that fire was able to spread so quickly as they work through this. But, at the center of all of this, again, we got to bring it back to these 70 people that are affected, 6 people who were hurt, one of them in the hospital. With all of that in mind, how long are the Red Cross and other groups that are stepping up to help expecting to be involved with this response?
So we didn't receive an exact timeline. You know, when the Red Cross comes in, they often say we just want to work with people as long as they need help. So they were at the leasing office on Monday night and Tuesday, directly working with the people who were displaced here. They expect to be back on Wednesday, so today, and they want to really make sure that they have a chance to touch base with all 70 people who were displaced, making sure that they can find another place for them to live, helping them recover any of their belongings if possible, anything like that. And, you know, we do know at this point that they're working very closely with the apartment complex. In fact, I've heard from multiple people who live there and were displaced that the apartment complex is working to get them into other units, both at Camden Westwood and then also at some of their other Camden properties throughout the Triangle. So that is definitely good news. I actually just heard back from someone who said it's been a really easy process and we feel like we made a lot of headway today. So that is good news. As far as the other community organizations, though, I could see this going on for months. You know, we've heard from different businesses in the area organizing food drives. We've seen GoFundMes pop up all over the place. Businesses are just organizing all sorts of donations to send out to people. And, you know, everyone that we've spoken with has said we just want to be there to help as long as we can and help as much as we can. So I think ending on a positive here, even though this is such a tragedy, I hate that this happened. You really do see a community coming together to make sure that everyone is okay and that they can really move forward here.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Heidi, and all of those helpers that are working on all of this. And thank you for listening to the WRAL Daily Download and for making us part of your morning routine. Another great way to get WRAL news is the Morning Briefing newsletter. That's a daily email with Triangle news, events, and headlines to help you get ready for the day. You can sign up at WRAL.com/newsletter.